Thank you all for attending this Lunch and Learn. My name is Lisa Klein, and I am with the Agriculture and Natural Resources team at UGA Extension Gwinnett. And I do the In the Garden series, which we have 2 evening webinars a month and one Lunch and Learn a month. And that includes what you're seeing here. Today is the Lunch and Learn of the month. And so this time we have lawn alternatives. Everybody's looking for a more eco-sensitive way to take care of their lawn. We get a lot of lawn and garden questions here. Specifically, what do I do if I have an older home and the trees have now grown up? Yeah, lots of questions that we have to address. And so this particular webinar should hopefully give you some ideas if you have a similar situation. Maybe you moved in 10 or 15 years ago, you had some small trees in the back and now they're a lot bigger, and your grass is kind of getting sad and just not growing very well. Maybe you want to have a homestead that looks a little bit more eco-friendly. So you're thinking of getting rid of the turf and adding in some planting beds. There's a lot of different reasons. So let's go ahead and jump in and we will start covering those. All right. So why would you want to rethink a lawn? So I went through some of the shade struggles. So we have a lot of homes that are, 10, 15, 20, 30 years old, have been around for a long time. And way back when, maybe the developer cut all those trees down and then they came back and replanted some smaller trees, and now those are getting big. And your Bermuda grass, which needs actually probably closer to 7 or 8 hours, it needs more sun than what it's getting. And so it's starting to lose out to persistence. All right. So that means that it is not shade persistent. It's going to start dying back and looking sparse and unhappy just because it's not getting enough sun. The same thing would happen in your garden with other types of plants too. Maybe you are looking at a really high water bill. Maybe you have a half an acre, 3/4 of an acre of property, and a lot of it is grass. And you have a sprinkler system, which is great, but we've had some tough summers recently where it's been pretty hot and dry. And so maybe you're looking to try to get a little bit more resource conscious and not use as much water for your turf. And you know that you can swap out some of that turf for plants, perennials, shrubs, that kind of thing that are way better on your pocketbook and needing water. Maybe you're just tired of mowing and edging. You're getting a little older, and all of that work is a lot of work, and you just don't want to do it anymore. So you want it to look nice, and you want it to be HOA acceptable. So you're thinking of getting rid of some of the turf and putting in other things. Maybe you just have a really boring yard. Maybe you just moved here and you're in a brand new tract home. They all look the same. They all have the same foundation plantings and landscapes, and it looks boring. It really does. So you want to spruce it up a little bit, and you want to do some fun and interesting things that will look great in your yard and maybe make your neighbors envy you a little bit. Maybe you're in a really hilly area and you have a lot of erosion. So here, we don't have much topsoil in Georgia, and over time that can wash away. And when it starts washing away, the grass doesn't have anything to adhere to grow into, and you start getting rills and gullies, and similar to what you see up in that top picture. And then turf is just not the best plant. I mean, I know it looks good, a good, nice, pretty green carpet, but it doesn't really return much to the soil. It's a heavy nitrogen feeder, but it's kind of boring. There's so many more things that actually can return more to the soil versus just taking it. And then a chemical dependency. So A lot of people have yard services that'll come and they'll fertilize and they'll put herbicide and pesticides down, and that can end up in our waterways. And so you're doing a lot of bad things by allowing that overspray, if they're using a liquid, or the granular that ends up in the storm sewers and then in your detention pond or in the nearby stream. And then that just contributes to point source pollution. It's not good. And we've had several webinars and studies on that. So maybe you're wanting to do better, and that's great. So how to make the transition. You can see the before and after here. Looks great. And once it's actually in practice, very easy to maintain, very easy, and it looks great. So there's different types of ways you can make the transition. So you could do like a meadow style planting or like a pocket prairie type thing where you have the front lawn with kind of native grasses and things. Now, keep in mind, if you have an HOA, this may be an issue and you have to seek approval first. But if you're in a non-HOA neighborhood, or you have a very lenient one, or you have your own estate size property outside of that, then yeah, sky's the limit. You can do any of these. So you can put little blue stem, muhly grass, wildflowers, that kind of thing, plants that will really do better, and you just don't have to do too much, especially if you use natives in the right plant, right place. You can get down to almost zero mowing, which you would only really be doing in the fall of the year. It'll do some carbon sequestration for you, kind of get a little fancy there. And it's great pollinator support. So you'll be an oasis in a large desert, which is what usually you see in neighborhoods, tract homes where folks just really don't do a lot of that. You'll be that oasis. The only downsides, it can take a while to establish. And in the meantime, you may have neighbors who aren't very happy with you. And if you have an HOA, you've got to show them regularly that this is an improvement plan and provide updates. Next up, hardscape, softscape blends. So this can help reduce the footprint. You can see a little bit of that in the top photo with the flagstone. And you can just be real simple. Just add some pine straw and mulch islands. So areas under a tree or near a lamppost or a mailbox or something like that, just mulch it and then add some plants. That'll take away from the turf and it will add in some biodiversity. Dry creek beds, that's another solution, especially kind of rain gardens if you have drainage issues. A lot of these tract homes on these big slopes, if developers are spot on, they will know what to do and they will do it correctly. But sometimes they don't, and they can cause more problems because they don't know what they're doing. And because they don't know what they're doing, you end up with more problems, and you can end up with erosion, certainly cultural problems, because Bermuda and zoysia do not like to be wet, neither does fescue. You can end up with fungal issues. So having that dry creek bed and then you can put some plantings in there might be a solution. It can be a little costly though, but if you are willing to throw in a hand and do a lot of the work yourself, it can really end up looking nice and not be as expensive. So eco-friendly lawns, maybe you want the lawn. Maybe you have a lot of shade and you're looking for an alternative. And so these eco-friendly lawns, and there's a lot of companies out there that will sell seed for them. They're like clover blends and mixed species of fescue and other things that can provide the green you're looking for and pollinating plants. So the pollinators can be happy, like with the micro clovers and things like that. It also doesn't need as much water, so it will still look green during drought when maybe everybody else's Bermuda is starting to go dormant, and it'll provide bee forage, so the pollinators are going to like it. So low maintenance and water saving options. Going into a drought here in North Georgia, which is kind of what we're doing now. You're hearing more and more about how we're in a severe drought. We're kind of going into year 2 for that, and not a lot of rain on the horizon. We've got this big high pressure system that's kind of sitting over us and blocking everything. So maybe we're seeing maybe an inch or half an inch every 3 weeks, that's not sufficient to keep things alive. So all of your water loving type plants, which is going to be turf, and a lot of other type plants that we put, prefer a lot more moisture than what they're getting. So consider adding some rain barrels, and you can get those yourself. You can order them online. John Butler over at Gwinnett Water Resources holds a couple classes a year on that, and you can look them up online. And if you can't find them, you can always message me, and I'll have my contact information on the last slide. So you can always reach out to me and I can get you in contact with him or provide the link, and you can sign up. And I think it's about $40. You can get a rain barrel. You can use an Oya. So that's a buried clay pot. It's a very ancient way of doing it. Uh, Basically, you just take a big old pot with a lid, terracotta. You bury that down in the ground next to your plants. You fill that with water, and the water leaches out through the terracotta to the soil around there, and it provides a simple way for the plant to get the water that it needs without the evaporation issue. So very nice way of doing things if you have them well placed in a raised bed. Maybe not, the best way to do it with the tree roots, because those can certainly break that pot. But yeah, a good option. And then you can also start small with xeriscaping. So xeriscaping is a big thing, more so out west, California, Colorado, more arid areas. But it can be done here too. I mean, you don't need to have cacti and other things like that in your landscape, much like you would out west. But you can pick plants that are very tough and don't need a lot of care or water. You can use permeable landscaping. So that could be like granite sand. You see the picture over on the right. That's flagstone with granite sand or crushed slate or something like that in between. That allows any water to infiltrate down, keeps it all on site, and you still get the hardscape. You don't have to water that either, which is great. Still looks wonderful. Just be mindful of if you have a little slope to your property, because that is not concrete. If you have slope to your property and it is not flat, it will pick that granite sand or silica sand or crushed gravel, whatever you've got there. It may pick that up if you have a very small grain or gravel size to that. So keep that in mind. If you have a bit of slope to your property, consider using some type of heavier aggregate, like pea gravel or river cobble or something like that. You might want to think about converting a side yard that you don't do anything with. Maybe there's just a hose reel there and it's just grass, but it doesn't get much sun because the house next door is too close. Get rid of that. You don't need grass there. So consider putting hardscape like your flagstones here. Maybe put some mulch down and some shade loving plants, and just get rid of the turf. You don't need it. And think about maybe in the hot, dry areas installing herb or lavender garden. Uh, they really like full sun and will do very well there. And it'll look interesting. And you have your herbs for your kitchen. You can also plant dry tolerant ground covers if you want that turf look, like creeping thyme and frog fruit. And we'll go through some of those. And then you could also just do a rock garden. Maybe you were one of those folks that they did a lot of blasting in the subdivision when they were building, and now you have a lot of rocks in your yard, big chunky ones. And so you can take advantage of that, or you can go purchase them. So here you can go to Texas A&M, which is their version of Extension, AgriLife, and you can get some good information on xeriscaping and how to actually incorporate that into your landscape. But basically the goal is you want to reduce your water usage by 50 to 75%. That's a lot, right? But it will trim down your water bill. So if you have a really high water bill, that can help. And it's a lot easier to maintain. You won't have to water things. You don't have to worry about, oh man, my sprinkler system malfunctioned. Now what am I going to do? That kind of stuff. You can begin with a smaller area, so you don't have to just go all in. You can do a small area in your backyard, a small area in your front yard, maybe make some planting beds along your walkway, that kind of thing. And then just, get bigger and bigger over time if it works well for you. You can also be very smart about it. Notice where that water flows. For instance, if you've got a backyard and there's kind of a little swale, which is a depressed area that the builders a lot of times will put into the landscape to help convey water, you could go in and you could put in some river stone. Dig down, prep that, put the correct type of substrates in there, and then put that stone in there. That might help a lot more, and you won't have to be fighting with the turf. Prepare the area, stuff like that, where you're going to get rid of the sod, put down some geofabric to prevent weeds, and then spread your rock. You can change up the size of the rock. You can get some big ones in there. You can plant stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of things. Group your plants by water needs. So if you do have some in there that can tolerate wet feet, put those down towards the bottom of that little swale so that they're reaping the benefits of any water that comes through. And then plants that can tolerate drier feet up on the tops of the banks. And then just use turf when it's only necessary. So like play areas, although you can use artificial turf. I have a little section here. Pet spaces, which again, pets, if you've got a dog run and you're dealing with a lot of pet waste, there may be some better things to do. So think about maybe using some type of hardscaping in there instead, and just general high traffic zones. So here are some examples of drought tolerant plants. They're kind of a mishmash. Some of them like sun, some shade, some part sun. But you can go to the Clemson Home and Garden page. That's Clemson's extension, and they have plants that tolerate drought well, and they're broken down. You can see whether they do well in sunshade, that kind of thing. So Clemson is also in the Piedmont, just like we are, though they're maritime climate since they're a little closer to the coast. Not quite the same, but pretty darn close. And so a lot of what does well there will also do well here. And if you're trying to keep track and write things down, don't stress about it. I am happy to share my slide deck. So when we get to the back page and you see my contact information, just write down my email address and send me an email and say, hey, Lisa, I'd love the slide deck for, and then fill in the blank for whatever presentation it is. So a good place where you can start to do some good is going to be replacing turf grass on slopes and hills. I know maybe you just have a gentle slope and you're like, yeah, I don't really need to do that. Over time, it will erode away all the topsoil that is there, and you will end up with very sparse, sad looking grass. You're going to probably call us and go, I don't know, I can't get anything to grow there. And it's because you don't have any topsoil left. So your plants, the little Bermuda or Zoysia plants, they grow laterally. You'll get some seed that pops up, but they grow a bunch of different ways. They have rhizomes and stolons, and those little rhizomes will creep along just underneath the soil surface. Well, if there's no soil for them to grow into, you're not going to get much growth. And that usually happens when you get these gully washers that will, come down and you get an inch in 20 minutes. It washes a lot of that away. So just make it easy on everybody. You can take some of these great landscape rocks. Look at the top picture. That looks really nice. So you've got a bunch of really pretty landscape rocks on this slope, and then this homeowner has gone back in and backfilled with good soil and put a lot of these creeping ground covers in there. And then you can add mulch and other things. We have a place up in Rabun County, and it's a basement lot, and it faces south west. And so it gets a lot of sun, but it also is going off of a ridge top. So we have a very drastic difference between the top of the lot and the basement part of the lot. And that required some type of planting bed. So ours looks very similar to this top one. I've gone in with a bunch of different plants, and I've put a bunch of different plants in there to hold that soil in place. It's grown into that hillside. It looks really nice, very pretty gardens in and around that area. And it does a great job of holding all of that soil in. Always consider the right plant, right place. So not every plant is a sun-loving plant. Not every plant is a shade-loving plant. You've got to know what you're dealing with. So you have to consider sunshade requirements, moisture, soil nutrients, all of that, pH, soil, all of those things. So make sure, and I've got charts coming up, so you'll be able to do that. Make sure you're thinking of that and keeping that in mind when you're assessing the site. Next up, you're going to get rid of all of the existing vegetation that's in that area, dig it out, kill it out, whatever you're doing, solarize, and you want to get rid of the grass and the weeds that are there. Take care of that soil if you need to. Add erosion control measures if you need to, that kind of stuff. Terrace it, add those pocket gardens in on top of those rocks, that kind of thing. Think about if it's a multi-year project, because plants are expensive, right? Maybe you can get the hardscape in. Maybe you can get all of the rocks in. Maybe you can get the terraced hardscape in like you see on the bottom one, but maybe you can't afford the plants after that. That's okay. You can add a native wildflower mix in the meantime and distribute that seed, and you'll get plants that will grow up in there that will be very functional, very pretty, and then you can come back in later and add the perennials and the other types. Also think about, you can do vegetables if you want. So if you have a nice terraced area like you see below, that's a good place where you can actually put a garden in. Maybe your yard's been too sloped for, most of the time that you've lived there and you've never been able to do that. Kind of consider them fancy raised beds, if you will. And you can certainly keep tomato plants and interplant them with other types of perennials and things like that. That's called interplanting, and it's a very good way of just being, eco-conscious, and that you're feeding yourself and you're going to feed the pollinators. So if you're going to do something like that, make sure that you are following all the rules for that. So make sure you're selecting the correct material, hardscape material. If you're going to do retaining walls, think about, do you want landscape timbers? Because those are not they're not going to last forever. Stone, concrete blocks, or bricks, those are going to be permanent and a lot more expensive than wood, but lasts indefinitely. And then consider adding some drainage like French drains or weep holes, things like that, so that if you do get a lot of moisture, you don't end up with part of that wall collapsing because of hydrostatic pressure. So you need to make sure you have a way for water to get out of there, especially if you've got multiple tiers. And that may be something that a landscape company needs to be involved with in helping you build. All right, small steps. So here's just some good ideas. And again, we'll just kind of go through these, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty and the species list. So adding a shaded seating area with a hardscape area with an umbrella and pergola, a nice little place to kind of just sit outside and enjoy the outdoors. That dry creek bed. So if you have drainage issues, that's a good option. You can add a small container garden cluster. So containers are great. You can use them whether you have a lot of property or no property. They're great for putting a garden on your balcony or out in your backyard if you've got a hardscape area and you can contain things just to those pots. You can create a small herb garden near the kitchen door. So it's really handy for you to just walk out and grab some herbs as you need them. You can get fancy and you can have a really pretty flagstone path that kind of goes through, and then planting beds on either side, a few trees here and there. You get rid of all the turf and it suddenly becomes like your little personal oasis, just like Gibbs Gardens or Athens Botanical Gardens or anything like that. Suddenly you have your own private botanical garden. You can add a pollinator pocket. So, as I've mentioned several times, the developers don't usually plant pollinating plants. They just put these boring old landscape foundation plantings out there that don't do much. They don't flower, they don't produce any berries, nothing that really helps the environment. So you can take a section of your backyard or your front yard and change that into a pollinator pocket. Put in some really pretty flowers like you see in that middle picture, actually any of those pictures, and the plants will fill that area out if you prep it correctly and look really pretty. And the only thing you really have to do is go in maybe in the fall and just kind of deadhead and clean it up, right? That's what a lot of us would like to be able to do, just enjoy it. And you can enjoy or install a bird bath or some other kind of wildlife feature. Everybody likes watching squirrels eat corn. You got the Yankee flipper and it's flying around and then swinging away, which is kind of hilarious. But you can get a lot of enjoyment and peace just by watching the birds eat. So, I mean, why not add something like that on there, a bird bath or a wildlife feature of some other type, like a puddle for butterflies, that kind of thing. Replacing turf on slopes, I mean, that might be the only project that you really have that you want to invest in. And the slide previous where you had the boulders on the hill or the terraced gardens would be a good option for you. Or you can see something like that top picture there where you have someone has just come in and added a bunch of different grasses and herbs and flowers and all sorts of things on their hillside. Now they don't have to mow it anymore. Replace turf along the house foundation or under trees. Just swap it out, put a planting bed. If you've got a shady area next to the house on the northern side, go in and replace it with some type of shade loving plants, hostas or ferns. That'll look so much nicer than turf right up to your foundation. Under trees, turf competes with your trees for nutrients. I cannot express that enough. Not only that, but when you're out there cutting the grass, how many times do you run into the tree with the lawnmower? How many times have you used a string trimmer to trim around the trunk and nicked the trunk? You're going to kill your tree. Basically, you have about 50%. Once that trunk is damaged more than about 50%, that tree is going to go into decline and die. And then you're going to have to replace that tree. So please consider putting at the minimum some type of mulch around the base. Get rid of the grass underneath your tree. It's probably going to die out anyway. Put some type of mulch under there. Your tree will be much happier and live much longer. You can eliminate corners or really odd shaped areas in your yard. It's so much easier to cut grass on a curve than it is to go on a corner and do right angles. So if you go and you smooth out those corners, let's say you have a privacy fence, smooth out those corners and make them gardens. You've eliminated some turf, you've made it easier for you to cut the grass, and it looks great. So win-wins. And a hammock zone. So I don't know how many people would turn down a nice place to sit outside with a hammock and a book, or maybe to take a nap. We get, all 4 seasons here, and a lot of times in the late spring, or sorry, early spring, late fall, and even times in the winter, we can have nice weather. So it would be really nice if you had a place that you could have a hammock. And then, of course, I love this, the health strip. So a lot of us are in HOA neighborhoods, and this is the spot between the road and the um, sidewalk or up into your yard. Right now, it may just have grass on it, but if you don't have an HOA because you live maybe further out of town or in an older part of town, something like that, you can plant this area so you don't have to actually maintain it with grass. Just put some, plants and stuff in there. If you get a lot of rain, for instance, and you have a slightly sloped yard, you can put a rain garden in this area. There's so many ideas. Okay, supporting pollinators. Native plants adapted to the soil, host plants for butterflies and moths. They need those for their caterpillars so that they can actually turn into butterflies and moths. Some of them are very host specific and they only have like 1 or 2 plants that they put their babies on. Some of them have a lot more, but either way, it's nice to know what they need. Blooming plants, we love to see it when folks keep plants blooming all year round, winter included, because that supports pollinators. When you get nice 70-degree weather in the middle of winter, those pollinators will come out. So you got to have something to feed them. You want plants that multitask, so shades, blooms, erosion control. Don't have to water them, that kind of stuff. It's always good. Puddling areas for butterflies so that they can come and get their minerals and their water. Shelter, trees and shrubs versus just grass. And of course, leaving hollow stemmed garden debris. You can also do bug houses with you if you have those very specific sizes of straws in there because you want to support the native bees. And a lot of them will need that, like the mason bees, leaf cutters, that kind of thing. And then you can add grasses and sedges towards the outer parts of the yard, and that provides lots of habitat for wildlife. Don't forget to leave a little bit of bare undisturbed soil. We have a lot of native bees, miner bees that will ground nest. Usually in March, we'll get calls that'll say, I've got all these little holes in my grass on this bare dirt spot. What are these? Those are miner bees or other types of ground dwelling bees. And they're basically having babies. So they're only there for a few weeks. Just let them be. Don't try to, not pun not intended, but that was kind of funny. Don't put insecticide on them. Okay. They're there. They're trying to reproduce and do their thing. Just let them be. They'll leave and you won't see them again until the same time next year. Oops. Sorry. I've got a lot of lag in my internet here. All right, planting a wildflower meadow. So this is probably not something that's going to fly in an HOA community with covenants. They're very particular about what you do with your grass. This is something that you can do if you live in an older part of town where you don't have an HOA or where you are maybe out in the country a little bit more on an estate size lot, and you can do something like this. So this is a really good option where you, over the course of a year or two, go in and you put wildflower mixes in there. It provides all sorts of habitat and food, nursery habitat, all the things that pollinators need. And you can get a nifty little sign. There's a lot of signs that you can get. This one just is from the Xerxes Society. If you want more information on that, you can use that QR code there. And don't worry, I do record these, so you can always go check them out later if you want the QR code, or I provide the slide deck, so you can do that too. Spring and fall planting, just like things we would normally, recommend with shrubs, trees, whatever. That's the best time too. Uh, it can take up to 2 years, so it can look kind of scrubby and bad. Your neighbors might not be so happy, so you might want to invite them over for dinner a few times more, just to keep them happy. But eventually, it will grow in if you've prepped it and chosen the correct seed, and it will look very nice. So keep in mind your neighbors. If they're not in on it or not very happy about it, then you might want to compromise a little bit and maybe not have the whole yard that way, but definitely a little bit if you can, or in the backyard, whichever works. And understand some maintenance is required. You still have to mow, you still have to take care of that kind of thing. So just follow some of the directions like you can find there at Xerxes, and it could be something that you would want. All right, artificial turf. I did talk about that. There are people that would just prefer to have fake grass than to have real grass. It works in some situations. I personally wouldn't want that, but if you have a very small lawn and you're tired of cutting the grass, because let's face it, why do you need, if maybe you only have like a 10 by 10 foot section of turf, why? Just why? So you could make that flowers, you could make that containers, or if you want the look of turf, but you don't want to maintain it, you could do artificial turf. You still have to make sure it's installed correctly. So you can read up a little bit here. University of Minnesota has a publication on that, but you can see the oopsie, I didn't do it correctly down below. And then you can see the proper one done up above. It can look real and nice. Again, you just have to make sure that you're doing it correctly. So you do have to do a lot of prep. It's not cheap, especially if you get good quality stuff. And if you have a slope, you have to make sure that it is installed correctly. Because water can infiltrate and get down and then eat out underneath it. And then it looks really bad. So consider your options and think about it, and it may make more sense to actually have a natural you know plants, live plants, versus the turf. Okay, moss. I love moss, and I think it definitely holds a place in my heart. If you have a really heavily wooded area and you just have horrible compacted soil, lots of tree roots, just can't get much else to grow, you can get moss to grow. It likes those kinds of conditions. So they have no roots to speak of, but they have these little hair-like rhizoids that will help to anchor themselves. And you don't have to worry as much about them on a hillside or a flat area or whatever. They like compacted, they like more acidic, and they like shady. They'll absorb their nutrients from their leaves. So you don't have to worry about the soil so much. They can grow anywhere. So you can have pots, you can have rocks, logs, that kind of thing. And they do a great job of controlling erosion, suppressing weeds. You don't have to fertilize them, you don't have to mow them. Deer don't like to eat them. It's great. And so because grass is overrated, I personally am a big proponent of moss in a shady situation. I have some of that going on in my own backyard, and I would like to have more. So I probably will think about doing something similar to what you see down on the bottom. I think that looks beautiful. And that helps kind of create its own little microclimate. But they are just simply one of those organisms that's pretty fascinating and kind of cool. You can do it pretty easy. You can actually buy it online, just like any other plant. You can do things if you have pots and rocks and stuff and you want the moss to cover that. You can make what's considered a moss milkshake where you blend it up with like buttermilk or yogurt or some other kind of dairy product, and it uses those sugars to kind of spread itself and feed itself, and it looks really neat. So just make sure you keep it wet for a while to get it established, and then it'll be kind of on its own. So there are different types of mosses that you can use. Here's some examples. There are others, of course, but haircap moss, pretty, small, 2 to 4 inches. Cushion moss, that's the one probably everybody's most used to seeing. You can see it growing in clumps, kind of irregular clumps, but you can mix and match. You can get blue star creeper, which kind of a moss, but kind of not. It tolerates full sun, but can tolerate some shade. That you'll see that in my list here. And then if you want to know how to actually put together a moss garden, you can go check out How to Grow Moss, the benefits, types, and methods here at this QR code. All right, drainage issues, you can create a rain garden. I have this one here. You see, I've already recorded this. This is one that I gave, I think it was last year, Rain Gardens and Home Landscapes. We did an advanced training for master gardeners on that kind of topic, and it was very popular. So rain gardens are great to have if you have drainage issues and can help a lot. You can mix a dry riverbed in with a rain garden, and it does a great job of managing water that you're having a difficult time getting a hold of. So if you've got a lot coming from a neighbor's lot and you don't know what to do with it, and it's just eating away or eroding your landscape, there are things that you can do. So you just have to kind of be willing to put a little money into it to fix it and to make it look better. But this is basically just a depressed area in the landscape that will collect rain. You want to keep it on site. We really would rather you keep it on site and allow it to infiltrate versus flowing out into your street and into the storm drain and then into the detention pond. Because once that leaves, it doesn't have an opportunity to infiltrate down into the ground. It will always do much better infiltrating into the ground. That recharges groundwater. That does better. Some municipalities do pump from an aquifer. So it's better to keep it on site. It's better to allow it to infiltrate, and a rain garden can do a great job of that. Don't worry about mosquitoes. Typically, most rain gardens, just like detention ponds, are only going to hold water for about 12 to 48 hours. Mosquitoes have approximately a 9 to 14 day lifespan, and it takes them about the same amount of time to breed from an egg all the way to an adult. So, at 12 to 48 hours, that's only 2 days. The water will be long gone before the mosquitoes have an opportunity to actually breed and pupate out. So perfect. And then you can incorporate native plants that tolerate these wet dry cycles. In this particular webinar, I give you all sorts of lists of plants for that, and I believe either in there, or if you would like, I have we were working on lists of plants and making it super easy to tell by moisture needs, type of plant, that kind of thing. So I do have a list of plants that would be great for that. If you have questions, watch this, or you can reach out and ask me for that list of rain garden plants. building a rain garden, not going to go in too much into it, but figure out where you've got to figure at the low spot in the yard. You might have to do a little excavating, so removing 6 to 12 inches of soil. And then you have to add in some compost and sand for filtration, all that kind of thing. Try to size your rain garden about 20% of the size of the roof or patio, because you need to have it big enough to hold that water. And remember, the goal is to try to hold that water on site. So you want that longest edge of the garden to be perpendicular to the slope. So like that, and to catch the maximum amount of rainfall. Otherwise it's just going to keep going downhill real fast. You don't want it to do that. You want it to kind of the terrace method. No heavy clay, because they use clay to seal ponds, in case you didn't know that. So we don't want to use clay. Infiltration should be about a half an inch per hour or more. And a slope should be no more than about 12%. When you start getting more than that, you get a lot of velocity in the water and it's not going to function as well. It should not be constructed over utility lines, septic fields, or wellheads. Don't do that. It just doesn't mix. You don't want to worry about contamination or erosion or any of that. And then we always recommend native plants. So you can put like sweet spire, mist flower, coneflower, Stokes aster, muhly grass, cardinal flower, all the things. But remember, you can use the rain garden resources from Penn State. They give a really good description of how to build one. But remember, you need species of plants appropriate to the region that you live in. So, I have that list. I'm happy to share that. Georgia's Native Plant Society, I believe, also has lists on their website, and North Carolina, NC State also has some. All right, moving on. When you're going to do something like this, to get rid of some of that turf, you need to figure out what does the site need. So start asking yourself these questions. Foot traffic. Do you need to walk on it? Do you need to drive on it? Or are you just going to look at it? Is it the back of the yard near the shady spot on the edge where the grass has stopped growing? Light levels. Do you have a lot of shade under hardwoods so it gets some light during the winter time but not during the summer? Or is it in the blazing hot sun all the time? Soil quality. Is it very compacted red clay, horrible soil that just doesn't do well for grass and other stuff? Or is it kind of a loamy woodland type soil? Water. Do you need drought tolerant plants because it's in full sun? We've had some really rough rainfall years. We're just not getting a lot of rain these last couple of years. We had La Nina years, which are usually warmer and drier. And then I thought we were going to go to an El Nino year, but now they're telling us, oh, you are, but it's a super El Nino, which basically mimics a La Nina. So we're still dry. And we have high pressure systems that sit over us, which is what's happening right now. So do you need drought tolerant plants? Or are you looking at rain garden plants and it needs to be able to hold more water and tolerate wet feet? So you need to know that. Function. Is this going to be in a play area for dogs or kids? If that's the case, you probably don't want the lawn alternative. You may want a hardscape. Makes more sense, right? And you don't have to go out there and worry about the dogs wearing down the grass or whatever you're planting. And then management style. Do you really want to put a lot of management into it, or are you perfectly fine with mowing it once a year? Maybe you like the manicured look, and that's okay too. So just kind of take those things into consideration. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell on these. We'll just talk a little bit about them. But again, if you want the slide deck, you're welcome to it. You can just email me. My information will be on the last slide. So eco-friendly turf grass replacements. These are sunny. They're broken down by sun, part shade, and shade. And then I'll have a chart or a matrix that kind of goes over the same, but with a little bit more, maybe easier to read, where you can see water needs and what they're good for, that kind of stuff. So a little bit of a duplicate type of information, but a good way that if you just want to print off a couple slides and keep them there, you can do that too. So these are good replacements for turf grass. So you've got white Dutch clover. And it's funny because in some parts of the Midwest and even down here, it's considered a weed and people will try to kill it out of their turf. So It's one of those that bees really like. It doesn't take much in the way of care. It's very easy. It has a very wide hardiness zone, as zones 3 all the way down to zone 10, which would be Florida, and it can live in full sun. So it doesn't need a lot of water. It's pretty moderate to low in water needs. So it's a good option if you have a really big area and need to maybe overseed something to kind of take up some of that, where you don't have to worry about how much water it's going to get. Frog fruit, say that fast 5 times. That's going to be your middle one there. And you can see the little flower that's in the middle. That's what it looks like when it's blooming, but it's very tiny. You can see that. It's very tough. It forms kind of a thick mat, very tolerant of heat and drought and some light foot traffic. So if it's just in your yard and you're walking around your yard every now and again, that's perfectly fine. This is going to be something more that you would see for central North Georgia, like where we are here, all the way down into Florida. It does very well in higher temperatures and humidities. So this is a good option for a southern lawn replacement. And once it's established, it doesn't take a whole lot to keep it going. Trailing phlox, this is one that you'll see blooming kind of now, and it's good for hillsides. And then when it's done blooming, it will just be kind of a low growing green ground cover. Very heat tolerant. You sometimes will see this in old homesteads and it's just kind of crept around and done its thing. It thrives in poor soils. You don't have to do anything to it. Zones 5 through 9. So probably like southern Tennessee all the way down to South Georgia. So again, a good southern alternative. Full sun and very low to moderate water needs once established. Again, more full sun. You've got blue star creeper. You can see that above. They've done kind of a layered effect there. So it's less turf that you've got to cut, and it just kind of does its thing, and it's perfectly happy. Zones 5 to 9, so again, fairly southern, forms that dense, tiny little carpet with some blue flowers. You can walk on it after. So once it's established, this is something you can do flagstones and then interplant. Okay with full sun to part sun, and does prefer more consistent moisture. So if it's been kind of a dry summer, you might want to water it in between your stones if that's what you got. Creeping thyme, it's kind of fragrant. It's good pollinator. You can, if you have some big rock outcroppings here, not so much in Gwinnett, but like other parts of Georgia where you may have some of these big rock outcroppings, you can plant this. This looks really nice. Can handle light foot traffic. Pollinators like it. And again, pretty similar to what the hardiness zone is. Doesn't need much water. So I like that. And then you've got your clovers and your micro clovers that don't grow very tall. Those are a great lawn alternative for shade. I guess I should put in there that the micro clovers are actually more tolerant of shadier areas. Very drought resistant. You don't have to do much to them once they're established. And the pollinators like them because they bloom. They also are a legume in that family and they're nitrogen fixers. So they're actually putting good stuff back into the soil, which is nice. Okay, more, almost done. A lot more full sun than others. You've got blue-eyed grass. It's a grass-like perennial with some flowers in the spring. It's also one that, maybe up middle Tennessee all the way down to South Georgia. Full sun, doesn't need much water. Then you've got some sunshine mimosa. This is one that's probably better situated. I don't have the zone in here, but it's better situated to middle South Georgia and down into Florida. And you'll get these little pink pom-pom flowers that pop up, and then it kind of just is a very low growing plant. Probably not one that's walkable, but will tolerate foot traffic. So it's a good option if you have a hard time in an area that for maybe once or twice a year gets some heavy traffic. And then creeping phlox. This one again has a very wide hardiness zone, and it blooms and it tolerates full sun, but some shade. So options. And then here we've got some part sun. You've got green and gold. Apologies. It looks like I didn't change out the pictures. I'm sorry about that. Sedges, Not the kind that's in your yard, but these are more native sedges that will spread in kind of a very lush mat. Making a note on here, I'll change those pictures out. If you want a copy of this, I'll fix that and then send it out before I do that. And then you've got golden ground seal, so that'll bloom mid-spring to summer, and it'll attract pollinators. Again, these are all fairly wide into the Midwest, all the way down to the South, and very uh, drought tolerant for the most part, don't need a lot of care after they're taken care of. And then you've got dwarf mondo grass and liriope. I use dwarf mondo grass. I probably should have put in here the little parking area that I had. Couldn't get anything to grow there because it's just too low light. So I went in and used some hardscape bricks and then interspersed with the dwarf mondo grass. Throw a little fertilizer on it every so often, water it when it's dry, and it's beautiful. Sometimes I have to go in and when a plant dies, I'll replace that. But I think we're on year 3 or 4 now. It looks fantastic, and it's a great overflow parking area. It's very tolerant to being driven over. So if you want a hardscape intermixed with a plant, the dwarf mondo grass is good too. And the liriope, I have some of this on a hillside. Note there are 2 types. There's and again, I'll change out the photos here. That's not what you see here. The spicata, Liriope spicata, that's going to spread via rhizome. And the Liriope muscari is a clump forming one. So if you have a hillside, you can do the clump forming one, and I call it the plinko. That's my own thing. The plinko method. We have like an odd number 7 and then 5 interspersed, and it helps slow water down so that there's very little velocity and it doesn't take soil away. The spicata is spreads through rhizomes. So if you have an area, as long as you put edging, which I have it along a driveway on a slope. I have, it's probably, 2.5 feet wide by probably 20 feet long. It does a fantastic job of slowing all of that water down and absorbing a lot of it. It looks great. You can cut it with a string trimmer or run the lawnmower over it. So it's kind of a good alternative for turf. And then here's some shady, eco-friendly turfs. So you've got moss, which we already talked about. Lots of options here. Doesn't need a ton of moisture once it's established, getting it established. But generally, it's going to be kind of moisture shade, I would say. Great for compacted, very shady areas where you can't get anything to grow and you want something that's green. This is a good option. And it's okay with acidic soil. You don't have to adjust that and put lime on it. So low nutrient soil, like woodland soil, it's perfect. You've got partridge berry, little evergreen leaves, white flowers, red berries. It's fine for deep shade. So this is another option, and pretty tolerant from Midwest all the way down to probably Macon area. And then woodland phlox, very fragrant in the spring, and it'll spread nicely in woodland conditions and shade to part shade. So here are the charts that I said that I had. So these would probably be good ones that, again, you can request the slide deck and you can print off. And it gives you a good idea of what zone they're in, how much water is necessary, how much traffic they can handle. Do you need to walk on it, or do you not need to? And then the management, how much management does it need? And that's going to be for sunny. And then here are your part shades. That's green and gold right there. And then dwarf mondo grass. And this is similar to what mine looks like. So I didn't use flagstones. I used actually just regular old landscape stones that could be used for, I think these are retaining wall stones, but they're the very small ones. So I have them kind of in a triangular type shape. So they fan out. I'll have to see if I can find a picture. Maybe I'll put that in there and replace that with this one. But it does a great job, and it tolerates a lot of shade. So I know it says you know in the previous one that it needs some sun, but it is tolerant of low light conditions. It's pretty happy. Just toss in a little fertilizer and you don't have to think about it too much. And so conclusions, work with nature, not against it. Problem solvers are, don't just look at it and go, oh, I got to do something about that. Think about what you can do. And if you have questions, you can always come to us here at Extension. That's why we do stuff like this, to give you some ideas for things that you might want to do or could do to improve your landscape and make it, work with it, not against it. You can change what beautiful looks like. I know some people think that a big turf lawn is great, but it's so high maintenance and it requires so much care and cost. I mean, think about a lawn service, how much that costs per year, where you could go in there and change out a lot of that, probably cut down on your costs for maintenance, and it looks great. The 10% rule, you don't need to flip your whole yard at once. Just convert 10% of your turf, backyard, front yard, whatever. Increase a planting bed, add a new small pocket garden. Just change it up a little bit. And if you like it, you can do another 10% until eventually maybe you've only got 30% turf and the rest of it are planting beds. Patience. So a lot of these options are going to take a while to grow and to fill out. The sleep, creep, leap rule for native plants. So the first year, they're putting energy into getting established and trying to get healthy. Year 2, they're going to start growing, and then all of a sudden it's going to take off. So keep that in mind and just be patient. And then cues to care. Check with your HOA. If you are an HOA neighborhood, not all of them will allow these methods on your property, which is sad. Sometimes they'll allow them in the backyard. Sometimes they have very strict rules about interplanting or changing planting beds from what they are now. You just need to check first. And then every square foot matters. By getting the amount of lawn footprint down, you're going to help contribute to your pollinator population, your wildlife, keeping that water on site, having more infiltration instead of runoff, less fertilizers, less all the things that contribute to non-point source pollution. And that's a big problem in and around metro areas. So anything you can do to help that by allowing water to stay and infiltrate is good. And so you can provide an oasis for wildlife. And that's basically it. So again, if you would like a copy of the slide deck, I'm happy to do that. You can use that lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com, and you can email me and I am happy to share that with you. Let's see if there's any questions. If I plant, the deer eat everything. What can I do for that? Yes, deer. Well, number one, don't feed the deer. A lot of suburban people do that, thinking they're so beautiful and so graceful and oh, they have babies. Deer don't have any pressure on them and their population in suburban areas. You can't really hunt for them with a gun. And a lot of people say, oh no, that's horrible, except that that's what keeps their population down. So if you have deer and they have twins or triplets, they are not supposed to have twins or triplets. They're only supposed to have singletons, and that means they're too well fed. You're feeding the deer, whether by accident or intentionally, you're actually increasing what wildlife studies call carrying capacity, and that's for fish or wildlife, whichever, but you're increasing the carrying capacity. So the land can only support so many deer. But by providing yummy landscape plants, and if you're feeding them birdseed or corn or whatever, you're providing too much food, and now suddenly, if you move, they can't survive at the same rate. The food went away. So I implore you, if you are feeding the deer, please don't, and have some kind of deer-proof type bird feeders. If you're doing that, you don't want to feed them. We can give you methods for harassing them to move on. If they're in your yard and they're eating everything, there are things that you can do. Deer are creatures of habit. They don't like being harassed. There are lots of things that you can do to harass them to get them to move on. So if you're having problems, you can actually go on to the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, which is right there. You see the link. There is a nuisance wildlife management video, and there's another one specifically for deer. You can watch those, or you can just reach out to us, and we can give you some solutions for that. Should I remove grass before mulching around a tree, or would the mulch kill the grass on its own? If you can scrape it off a little bit and then put the mulch down, that's probably better. It's going to die anyway if you cover it up. But before that actually happens, if it's Bermuda specifically, it's going to grow through the mulch and it's going to look really icky. You don't want to spray herbicide on that because, especially now, since it's fairly dry, it's not going to be, dilution is the solution. And so you may end up killing some of your tree roots if you do that. So if you're under a tree, don't spray herbicides to kill the grass. Make sure that you try to remove it by hand. You can just use a shovel and skim the roots off, and it may take a little bit, and then you can pull out the rest of it as it comes up, but do that, or put some kind of porous landscape fabric down first. Yes, I like the moss too. What are some options for exposed tree roots? So trees, as they get older, will naturally push up, or you'll have erosion of the soil on those structural roots. That's normal. Okay, that's usually going to happen from the drip line or the outside part of the crown of the tree into the trunk. That's the area that should be mulched. You don't really want to put a lot of topsoil over that because that can actually contribute to asphyxiation on that root system of the tree. So we request that you do mulch if you're going to do that. I know some people cut grass and they run over those roots and they nick them. And you know, that's ideally not what you should be doing. You should actually have that whole area under that tree mulched so that those roots are protected. You want to protect the roots and you want to protect the trunk so that that tree lives a nice long life. No more than probably about 2.5 inches. No mulch volcanoes. You pull that away from the trunk. You don't want voles or any other little chipmunks or things to nibble on the bark. Pull the mulch away and go no more than probably about 2.5 inches on the depth of the mulch. I have Liriope muscari growing randomly in parts of my yard, and I want to expand where it grows. How can I propagate it, and what little I have to thrive? It's a perfect question. So you can actually purchase that. It's a clump forming. The muscari is the clump forming. The spicata is the one that grows by rhizomes. So the clump forming one will just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you can split some off, although it's very tough. It's a hard clump. It's one that you would have to literally probably dig the whole thing up and then use a shovel to split it up because it is so tough. The root system is very tough and it grows together. It does grow very readily from seed, so birds will a lot of times help you with that. You can take the seed also, and you can try to do some stratification, although I'd have to check. I know a lot of times that some of those seeds have to go through the digestive system of an animal in order to become viable, and that might be the case with the muscari, but I'm not 100% certain on that. It is pretty easy to find. You can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on Etsy, and they call them pips. So each of those individual little, it would be about the equivalent of a seed itself. It would come with a couple little leaves and a root system. And they usually sell them washed, those individual ones, and then you can plant those in the ground and then they will continue to grow. But you do have to plant them into the soil. So if you have really compacted hard soil, you're going to have to do a little amending to kind of get them to work. But yeah, you can purchase them. They're usually not terribly expensive. And you can also do that with the ones that you have, and you can get them readily at the big box stores and other places. All right, let's see. Does anybody have any other questions? One last opportunity to ask them. And again, I am happy to provide the slide deck. So if you'd like that, you can certainly send me an email at this email address. If you want to sign up for other classes that I have, the QR code on the left side is for our events and classes, and they're usually up like 3 months in advance, so you can see what's coming up. And then, of course, the YouTube channel. And this was recorded, so give me about a week or so, and it'll probably end up over there on the YouTube channel. But thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And you guys go have a good lunch and a good rest of the day. Thank you.